No, it's not a coffee shop.
It's like wood.
It's like woody.
A little bit.
Okay.
This is agricultural education, North Shore style.
This is the region where coffee is grown in the world.
Where Sydney-born Scott Graham and his team at Barker College are converting a growing number of urban kids to ag.
Out of our 420 or so students doing agriculture from year 9 to 12, probably about 8 or so are actually boarders from rural regional areas. The rest of them really are from the North Shore and the northern beaches of Sydney, so they have virtually no connection to agriculture at all.
Well, we've got durian today as our fruit of the week. It's probably the smelliest fruit out there. It tastes a lot better than it smells. What do you think? No good?
From coffee classes to exotic fruits, here learning about paddock to plate is done in reverse.
So I'd say our philosophy really is plate to paddock. In education, you really typically start with things that are concrete and you work towards things that are abstract. It makes the most sense to students. And of course, they all eat food and wear clothes. And so really starting at that point and working backwards is the way to really engage them in a metropolitan context.
When you're surrounded by the city, teaching the paddock part of the syllabus requires excursions and a clever use of space.
So these ones are warrigal greens.
While these students do get their hands on all types of crops and livestock, a big part of the program is focusing on the 60 to 70% of ag jobs that happen off-farm, with graduates going on to pursue everything from plant breeding and robotics to product development.
Agriculture in metropolitan high schools really has been overlooked. I mean, 2/3 of Australia's population live in only 5 cities. And so if we're really going to change the number of people going into agriculture, it's going to require something different to happen in metropolitan areas in agriculture.
We want to find out, is this a male yabby or is this a female yabby?
The school's different approach is paying off. In 2008, Barker had around 50 ag students and the course was almost shut down. Now, enrolments from year 9 to 12 top 400. And importantly, once they get a taste of it, most are hooked.
So in New South Wales, we have about 4,000 to 5,000 students starting Year 11 agriculture, and we have around about 1,500 finishing the HSC in Year 12. So there's a really significant drop-off statewide. At Barker, we have around about 110 or so students starting Year 11, and somewhere around the 90 to 100 finishing Year 12. So we keep, most of them maybe a 10% drop-off.
Schools like Barker are increasingly on Anthony Lee's mind. He's the CEO of Australian Country Choice, one of the world's largest family-owned cattle and beef suppliers.
What you got to do is you got to have a market for everything.
While some find boning rooms confronting, he thinks students should see what happens to animals in between the paddock and plate.
If you look at a young kid on a bush property, a remote property somewhere, they are exposed to it from birth. We don't see that in urban Australia, Metro Australia, so it's very foreign to us. I have a view that we absolutely expose people to it. Yep. Now tight, look where you're going, look where you're going.
Now, sparked by his own kids, the Brisbane-based father of 4 is taking his passion for education beyond the meatworks. Because while his children have grown up with a love for the bush and respect for its industries, he says they weren't learning much about ag at school, and what they did hear was largely negative.
I heard things like, you're part of the problem, or I'm hearing that the beef industry is really bad and we shouldn't be eating meat. Why would a teacher want to teach it? Why would a kid want to come into the industry? It's all the same issue if they're hearing bad things.
So for the last year, he's been lobbying for an overhaul of agricultural education.
Most industries would kill to have their industry in the curriculum. We have it in there, we just need to get it taught.
Have you ever had a cow before?
At the Royal Adelaide Show, there are plenty of lessons going on in the Learning Centre run by South Australia's Agricultural High School, Erbray.
These sheep are called a black-nosed valet.
While the tractors are a hit, students and teachers show both young and old there is far more to ag.
If you look at how chunky she is, that's going to give us lots of hamburger.
This is one of the best examples anywhere in Australia at any of the major shows, where you've got Herbre Agricultural High School students, nearly 200 of them here, working and demonstrating to the general public about what is agriculture today.
But Luciano Massiti, who heads up Australia's Primary Industries Education Foundation, says while there is plenty of interest in here, interest in schools generally drops off when ag is no longer compulsory.
There's lots of opportunities for kids to learn about agriculture. Once they hit high school, then there's less opportunity. So I think we need to bolster that all the way through.
So Anthony Lee's call for action has now led to a national working group that brings together industries, research and development corporations and educators.
I don't think we're coordinated. That is the biggest thing. I think, you know, it's not about Victoria or New South. It's not about cotton or beef. It's about agriculture in Australia. And we need a coordinated plan, and we need a coordinated effort about how we get to all schools right around Australia.
Phase 1 is to identify the best agricultural education programs. And in South Australia's Riverland is a high school with a program that's been described by educators as gold standard. Loxton High takes a very business-like approach to ag.
We're going to weigh them. We're going to do a fat score on the lambs. So we're ideally looking at whether these are ready to sell.
It's about making all those decisions with the kids that a farmer would be making on their farm. If it's an enterprise here at school, it has to be profitable.
Remember, it's the long ribs because we're looking at fat.
Justine Fogden lives and breathes ag. She's been teaching it for almost 3 decades and is also involved in her family's farm.
Yeah, this one's about a 2.5, maybe, yeah.
Yep, probably right. Maybe 2, because you can still really get your fingers in amongst those ribs, can't you?
Despite her passion and experience, she says being an ag teacher is a big undertaking. Between managing classes, developing content, and running a mini on-school farm.
54 kilos.
Sometimes it's a detriment that there's actually so many careers and so many areas that you can fit into agriculture. It's actually hard to expose kids to the full range. I'm probably running 10 or 12 different enterprises here, and I need to be at industry best practice for each of those to be successful.
It's a big ask, especially with the ag teacher shortage worsening in Australia and many schools struggling to fill vacancies.
We've had a lot of teachers who've retired and some that have left the system. And so from that perspective, there's a great deal of non-trained agriculture teachers that are in schools at the moment.
Agriculture teacher training varies from state to state. And for students who pursue an agriculture degree first, there are limited incentives for them to then go on to study teaching.
You know, there's 7 jobs for every graduate that graduates from an agricultural degree. So there's lots of choices. So to then go and do another 18 months to 2 years to get your Masters of Teaching and then come out on maybe even a lower salary than what you would have graduated on 2 years ago and increase your HECS debt.
So getting industry involved in ag education is vital for its survival and success.
We bring all the fruit back into this shed.
And in a region like the Riverland, there is no shortage of experts just down the road from the school.
And then we apply.
Today, Justine has brought her students to a local packing plant, where owner Michael Ingerson is only too happy to show what modern-day processing looks like.
I think it's really important that we get kids involved and show them the level of technology that's now in agriculture. We've come a long way from the years past, and the level of technology and IT and robotics in the industry now is substantial.
Opportunities like this have dropped off during the pandemic. While Justine Fogden says industries are providing more online resources, the chair of the National Working Group says there's a lot of room for improvement.
I think we could be making it a lot more dynamic for future-focused jobs. I think the jobs that we have now probably aren't the jobs 15 to 20 years from now. And I think our kids they're on top of that.
You're listening to VCE Agricultural and Horticultural Studies with Miss Hobbs. OK, let's get into it.
Someone who's taken the lack of resources into her own hands is Louise Hobbs, who started a podcast to help students prepare for assessments, which has reached well beyond her own school.
I literally started it for 5 students and it ended up reaching thousands. That one there's a little trotter.
Yeah.
That'd be a good show sheep, that one.
Yeah.
Trots around.
Yeah.
Louise is passionate about making agriculture something to aspire to. But despite coming from a progressive family farm at Coniva in Victoria, she didn't feel that way not so long ago.
When I went through high school myself, I got to my year 11 and 12 and the ag teacher, she said, oh, do you want to do ag? And I said, oh, no, why would I want to do that? Because I didn't see it as something that would be useful to me.
But after studying science and business management at university, she decided to pursue education through the Teach for Australia program, which led to her first placement at Garrote College, a small rural school with 80 students.
Oh, Kai, that's amazing. Oh my goodness, everyone look at Kai's. They look so good.
And much to her surprise, she was allocated Ag Studies, which has become her favourite subject, despite initially feeling underqualified.
And now cut down there and keep cutting down those holes. I was like, why am I teaching ag? So we really need to improve the understanding of both schools and teachers that are training in science, that ag is science, and if you train for science, you should also be able to teach ag. And give that a squeeze. Do you see all the bubbles coming out?
We need to diversify how we talk about agriculture. We need to talk about STEM. We need to talk about science, biology, English, agribusiness. I think there's so much potential for agriculture to sort of, I guess, plug into all the different streams of education.
Now, seaweed's a biostimulant, so does anybody know what does that mean?
And tap into the big issues like sustainability, food security and climate change.
OK, so we'll add our water now, so we're mimicking a rain event.
Ag is maybe the best place to do something about those things. When it comes to the top students academically, they're really attracted to those things, and in fact they often pick agriculture for that reason.
A desire to attract top students has also prompted Barker College to ditch one of the more traditional parts of ag education.
I think for schools that show animals, often the number one thing that people think about agriculture is that it's just showing animals, and that's the main focus of it, and that's really not what we're about. We want to have it seen as on par with sciences like biology and chemistry and physics and business studies and those kind of subjects. And so to get those higher academic ability students, it needs to be seen as more academic in its nature.
Do you think there is too much focus placed on showing livestock?
I do it a lot differently to some schools. They've learnt cattle husbandry, they've learnt how to show cattle, they've learnt how to assess cattle. That we're currently assessing the carcass results from the show. We're looking at how the abattoirs works. We've talked about the markets. So the showing side of it for me is this much.
From school to school, state to state and industry to industry.
Oh, beautiful. OK, someone go around. We want to pick those poos up.
There are many different approaches to agricultural education.
Once you've got your water in there, mix it up.
And while diversity is one of the selling points of ag, it also muddies the water for those trying to find a clear path forward to create and fund a national plan. Anthony Lee expects the next couple of years to be difficult, But he believes if all the players can stay focused, Australia's second biggest industry has a much better chance of reaching the workforce it needs in the future.
We have the resources, we have the capacity, we are essential service, we're always going to be here. We have everything going for us to actually affect this change, and it's up to us as the industry and the people within it to make it happen.